Hey kids! Today we're going to learn about Latin America. Latin America is the greatest part of the continent of America. But it wasn't very popular until the 18,000s, when Spanish, French, and Portuguese came seeking business opportunities as well as opportunities in a political office. When these foreigners had babies, they created the Creoles and Mestizos. When Mestizos and Creoles grew up to seek jobs, they found out they weren't living in equality. This made them really mad and they wanted to liberate themselves from these foreigners.
The best example of these types of revolutionary wars was the Haitian War of Independence. The small island nation was at one time mostly populated by black slaves brought from Africa. After the French Revolution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man abolished slavery. But many plantation owners in what used to be called Saint-Domingue refused to give up their slaves, and even when they were set free, nearly none of the officials in the island agreed to grant them citizenship. The French still felt and wanted to be superior to the blacks, even if it meant going against their own government and new constitution. Despite all this oppression and no capability of defending themselves, the black slaves rose up against French rule in 1791, leadered by Toussaint Louverture, a former slave. Fierce fighting ensued, with many deaths and intervention from Britain against the slave forces. They advanced and were able to achieve semi-autonomy in 1797, with Toussaint Louverture being appointed governor for life. But they continued their fight, and in 1801 invaded the Spanish Santo Domingo. But this situation didn't last long. Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in 1802 and sent 42,000 troops and one of his generals to re-establish French rule as well as slavery. Louverture was captured and exiled, but one of his generals, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, continued the resistance. In 1803, the French forces were finally defeated, and Haiti became the first independent black republic in the Americas and the world, showing once and for all that white dominion and superiority was not a constant and would not last forever.
Just like Haiti had been a colony under the European ruling, which reached peninsulas, unsatisfied Creoles, and mistreated natives and slaves. So when Spain was in political disequilibrium, they saw an opportunity and took it. This country wanted their independence since the beginning, which differs with Mexico, who was divided in those who wanted Fernando IV back and those who wanted to be independent. These made Venezuela's independence way shorter, more organized, and without so much political dispute after winning.
Another factor that helped was being led by Simón Bolívar. Although they were born in a wealthy family, Bolívar could sympathize with those who had it worse in the classist system that the Latin American colonies had. And after learning from the Enlightenment ideas and from Napoleon's ideals, he managed to lead the whole country to independence. So much was his skill that the need of people to be free from the Spanish that Ecuador, Panama, and Colombia were also freed by him. This marked a milestone in history because not only was the Spanish Empire crumbling, but people managed to unite for the greater good of liberty, escaping from a system that had lasted 3 centuries.
The most different process of independence was Brazil. Unlike many other countries, for example, Mexico, Argentina, and Venezuela, they didn't fight the government for their independence, and there wasn't a massive battle or a terrible bloodshed. Napoleon's desire to conquer all Mediterranean created a fear in other countries. France's rumored invasion to Portugal led the government of Portugal to leave to Brazil, in which the king made many reforms and made it the seat of the government over the entire Portuguese Empire. In Portugal, people began to question the authority of the king, and inspired by liberal ideas, a revolution was rising, which eventually made the king return, leaving his son Dom Pedro to rule Brazil in his absence. Since Dom Pedro had lived since the age of 9 in Brazil, he always felt a sense of nationalism towards Brazil. In September 1821, the government of Brazil was put back into colonial status by the Cortes, which were the members of the Portuguese parliament, leaving Dom Pedro governor of Rio de Janeiro. This angered him. The hostility of the Cortes caused Portuguese troops to take over Rio de Janeiro and send Dom Pedro back to Portugal, which he refused. This caused the Portuguese troops to surround Dom Pedro, but eventually retreated. He began to establish a new government with the help of Bonifacio de Andrada e Silva, when a messenger was sent to inform them that Portugal didn't support an independence. In anger, Dom Pedro declared Brazil's independence right there. Later, Dom Pedro was crowned emperor, and when he wrote to his father, King John, an official separation occurred on September 22, 1822. In 1824, a constitution was instated that solidified the government as a constitutional monarchy, and in 1825, Portugal recognized Brazil as an independent sovereign nation.